Hello everybody. My name is Rupert Reed. I am co-director of the Climate Majority Project and campaign lead on SAFER, about which more in just a moment. I can tell you that you're in the right place because, well, a lot of you look rather hot. You're in the right place. You're on planet Earth in the age of adaptation. We are here to launch a report and to launch a campaign. Both are called Strategic Adaptation for Emergency Resilience. What does that mean? Well, let's start with the word adaptation. This is about adapting to climate impacts. This is about coping with the bad stuff that is now coming at us and the worst stuff that is to follow. The idea of strategic adaptation for emergency resilience is that what we're seeking to do is to do that process of adaptation in a way that can actually work. And if it's going to actually work, it's going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to look upstream. We're going to have to think about the causes and not just the immediate precipitants of the trouble that we're in. So the idea is climate adaptation, but done strategically. And in order to build emergency resilience, in other words, resilience of every kind, inner and outer, we'll come back to that point, to the long emergency that we're in, and also to the specific acute emergencies that are now arising, flooding events, food shortages, whatever they are, whatever they may be. That is our task, that is our great work here together. What we're going to seek to do this afternoon is to lay out that work to you and why we think it's going to be not just necessary in the times that are coming, but game-changing if we get it right, in terms of what it then enables and leverages. Over now to my co-host, Caroline Lucas, who is going to tell you a little about why she thinks this subject matter is so crucial and why she's part of this effort to provide for us all strategic adaptation for emergency resilience. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Rupert, and thank you so much to all of you for finding one of the warmest rooms in the whole of London and for sitting through it. We are very grateful. As Rupert said, I'm Caroline Lucas. I was a Green Party MP for 14 years, and now I am offering some advice to this wonderful SAFER campaign. And I just wanted to say a few words about why it's so important to me and why I genuinely believe it has transformational potential. I've got 3 points to make, and I'll make them very briefly. And the first one is around context, and this is a context that you will know very well. But essentially, you will know that we need to put climate adaptation right at the heart of the government's agenda, not least because successive governments simply haven't done enough when it comes to adapting in terms of putting resources into enabling communities to keep themselves safe as more and more extreme weather happens. And it's not just us saying that, it's well known that in a sense climate adaptation is the Cinderella of the kind of climate action area. And you've got the Committee on Climate Change itself saying that when they've looked at government's progress towards their adaptation targets, then that progress is either too slow, or it's stalled, or it's even going backwards. On 46 different criteria that they've measured progress against, there isn't a recording of good against any of those 46. And even when adaptation measures are being pursued, they are frequently taking the form of short-term fixes like flood barriers or piecemeal reactive measures that can also contain within them very high carbon content. So that's the political context. The context is also, of course, the accelerating number of extreme weather events. And being very serious just now, I mean, we are on the cusp today of our third heat wave in this country, and it's still only early July. We know that without urgent action, we could see over 10,000 heat-related deaths a year in the UK by the 2050s. Already well over 6 million homes, over a third of railways and roads, over half of the UK's top quality agricultural land, all of those are at serious risk from flooding. In other words, climate impacts are no longer a distant threat. They are a present reality with worse still to come. To put it very bluntly, the horrifying scenes from the floods in Texas and Valencia won't always stay in Texas and Valencia. We are not immune from impacts. And the second point I want to make is that I think climate adaptation has been regularly misunderstood as a concept and deprioritized as a policy. I think too often adaptation is seen as some kind of defeat, something to resort to when efforts at climate mitigation or emissions reduction are failing. I think even some at the heart of the climate movement view it as a distraction from the urgent task of decarbonisation. And I think we're here today to say that nothing could be further from the truth. That this campaign, Strategic Adaptation for Emergency Resilience, recognises the transformative potential of building local community resilience and understands that collaboration in the face of a common threat can help to restore collective purpose and identity. It appreciates that far from being a distraction from decarbonisation, strategic adaptation can actually be a catalyst for it by transforming climate breakdown from the status of an abstract threat to a lived and shared reality. So if we start with the immediacy of resilience, rather than the abstraction of a colourless, odourless gas that needs to be eradicated at some time in the future, then I think we have a powerful tool to raise engagement among the majority, demonstrating the benefits of climate action in terms of both building more community and galvanising public support for more radical climate intervention as well. And let's not forget all of the evidence that shows that 89% of people globally and here in the UK want stronger climate action. We are in a majority and we must never let that be forgotten. And my final point is around depolarisation, because at a time when the populist right is deliberately weaponising climate action, I think the SAFER approach can deliver a deeper transformation as well, an approach based on depolarisation, a way of doing politics that moves beyond culture wars, with a programme that is local, collaborative and respectful. Indeed, I think its potential to be a bulwark against further attacks on climate action might indeed turn out to be one of its most important contributions. Strategic adaptation can transform not just economies, but communities, strengthening them against natural disasters, but also offering a way of binding them together, increasing their inner resilience, setting out a route to engage the previously disengaged or sceptical, offering authentic hope, and over time, earning the permission to dream bigger together. And as the climate emergency accelerates, that task, that collective dreaming and fighting for that better future is more urgent than ever. And that's why one of the aims of SAFER is to showcase, to celebrate and to amplify what's already happening at a local level. And that's why we're so delighted that so many representatives of key citizens' organisations are with us this afternoon in this room. They, you, are on the front line of transforming public engagement with the great crisis of our time. And when I hear your stories, I am reminded of my favourite quote, so I hope you'll forgive me for repeating it for the second time today, but it's worth it. The quote from Arundhati Roy, who says, "Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." My friends, I can hear her breathing when I hear your stories, and I can't wait to share them more widely with all of you here in this room. And so I'll pass back over to Rupert to introduce the case studies.
Thanks so much, Caroline. And if you want to know more of what Caroline thinks about SAFER, you can read the foreword to the report, which she wrote. I want to pick up on the vital point on which she ended there. This report, this campaign is not something coming from on high ex cathedra. It's not something where we're saying nothing's happening, we're saying that such and such needs to happen. On the contrary, what we're trying to do is to capture the momentum of and bring together a network and help convene stuff that is already happening It just needs to happen more, and it needs to be joined up better, and it needs to understand and become aware that we are the majority, and that strategic adaptation for emergency resilience is already starting all over the place. As Caroline said, a number of people who are doing it are in this room, and we'll be shouting out to some of them later on. But we wanted to go further than that. We were determined not to have this report and campaign launch consist mainly, or let alone exclusively, of us saying what we think should be happening, etc. We wanted to profile from the beginning some real exemplars of the trend that we're talking about. And of course, time is limited, but we've picked a couple of examples that we think are really interesting and really strong examples. The first of those is Retrofit Balsall Heath, as you will hear in just a second. Retrofit Balsall Heath is an initiative happening in a poor part of this country, in an ethnically diverse part of this country, in an urban environment, often thought to be quite a challenging environment for the kind of thing that we're talking about here. It's also a project that some of you, when you first hear about it, you might think, well, that sounds like the kind of climate action that I'm familiar with, but as you'll hear in just a second, actually it's a lot more than that, and we think it qualifies beautifully for being an example, an exemplar of what SAFER is all about. So I'm going to hand over now to my friend and colleague John Christophers, who is, well, one of the geniuses behind Retrofit Balsall Heath, and he'll tell you all about it.
I'll try to live up to those wonderful words of introduction. Thank you very much. I'm from Balsall Heath. This is our local group, Retrofit Balsall Heath. We're from the middle of Birmingham, inner city, diverse Birmingham, and the types of houses, Victorian terraced houses, which are all around us in Balsall Heath, you see on the slide there. We set off in 2022 with a number of other collaborators to look at the sort of foundational question for a movement, really, which we're calling Retrofit Reimagined, which is what if the climate transition and everything that we're trying to work on was designed, owned and governed by the people who live there. In other words, not designed by Michael Gove in Westminster, but with real agency and purpose for the local people involved, local community resilience. And this is our local Balsall Heath nature map. It's an area with a lot of bricks and concrete, but this is really looking at the vision of a green Balsall Heath, valorising the green parts, the wildlife and so forth. We're a collaboration of about 20 different community groups. I think if we look at climate heating and 29 million homes across the UK, it gets very overwhelming. But if we look at our own neighbourhood, 4,900 homes in Balsall Heath, that we might be able to do, let's say, 300 a year, and what does that mean? I think it becomes much more manageable. We had a very early success in our group campaigning for mandating heat pumps rather than gas boilers in a big local development. And buoyed up by that, we formed the local group. Many people have heritage in Pakistan and other parts of the world where the impacts of climate change are already being felt beyond 1.5 degrees already here. And what we're really looking at is how can we do something positive together, which looks at health, at food, at transport, at green space, nature, resilience for the whole of Balsall Heath. Much wider than just insulating our homes. But we're starting with insulating the homes, and through a scheme known as 𝗪𝗓, we managed in our small neighbourhood to get 1,400 sign-ups and 649 homes already retrofitted in some degree. We're at the moment co-creating the next phase as a collaboration, more of a collaboration with the City Council, and really wanting to have no one left behind. And as I say, I emphasise this is a collaboration with the MEC Trust, the 𝗺𝗺 Trust, lots of local groups doing this work together. And I want really to talk about three aspects of this, just very, very briefly in a nutshell. The first is the home, the individual home, and this is what people have been thinking of retrofit as, reducing CO2, and of course it does that by insulating the walls, the floors, the roofs, putting in solar panels, heat pumps, and ideally other renewable measures, ideally not just for the house but for the whole street. We see retrofit as much more than that. It's really three things: homes, neighbourhoods, hearts and minds. That's the home. The second part is the whole neighbourhood, and this is where it's about much more than just insulation. It's about growing community resilience. So we're looking at on-site renewables. solar panels and heat pumps and so forth to go in street by street. We're looking at healthy homes where we can banish black mould and damp. Our homes are making us ill, sadly, at the moment. Vulnerable people are affected by extreme cold, extreme heat, air quality, poor air quality in our cities, etc., and even food shortages. But we can look at healthy homes, we can look at local jobs and skills to bolster the local economy and give good quality work. We can look at shared spaces for the community where this resilience and some of these difficult discussions can take place. We've installed street furniture in this particular street I'm talking about, where people can sort of get to know each other much better. We're looking at transport, shared electric bicycles, different transport choices. Like many cities, Birmingham is completely clogged with too many cars, but if people can be taught to ride bicycles who haven't had the opportunity, it opens up other choices. We're looking at biodiversity. We've planted fruit trees in many of the gardens, composting, all that sort of thing. And of course that very much helps with overheating on a hot day like this. We recognise that many of our cities will be well beyond 3 degrees or even up to 8 degrees overheating in cities. And by planting green spaces, looking at resilience and green and blue infrastructure planting and water features and so forth, we can make a big difference. So this is really about giving agency to people, building trust, building community leadership and co-creation, so that people can locally collaborate in a deep way which is respectful of the wisdom of everyone involved, to give purpose and identity to our neighbourhood, to be able to do something real, tangible, that cuts fuel bills, but also has many other co-benefits in terms of resilience and lots of the things we'll be hearing about through today. And so the third part finally is hearts and minds. What if we look more widely than just community, and we look at the values, the shared values which make us human, and we build on those to build a coherent society. We're a very diverse neighbourhood, but the shared values that make us human, I think, wherever you are on the political spectrum, are the key thing in this. And Sheikh Nuru at the bottom of this slide, at the launch of Balsall Heath in 2022, when we come together as a community, we can take this to the next level. Homes, neighbourhoods, hearts and minds, Retrofit Balsall Heath. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. A very warm welcome there for the wonderful things you said. I want to add one anecdote of my own, which is I spent time with Retrofit at Balsall Heath. It is deeply impressive and deeply embedded into the community. This really came home to me when I was taken to Friday prayers at the Eco Mosque they have in town there, with a large number of local Muslim men. When I arrived, I was a bit kind of unsure of why I was there. By the end of the remarks in the Friday prayers, the sort of sermon that the Imam did, I had no doubt at all, because the final words of his sermon were these words. I'm quoting directly. He said, "And so you see, my friends, when we take climate action here together, it is really a form of worship." Wow. That's the kind of thing that we need if this is going to really arrive with the mainstream. So we now turn to a very different example. This is an example of a scheme which is only more recently turning in the direction of adaptation, which is what a lot of local community groups, etc., need to do. It's a scheme from an area which is less highly urban, which is less poor, and part of our point here is this needs to be for everybody, right? Strategic adaptation for emergency resilience. Every single community in the country needs this, whatever category you fall into. So that's why we thought it would be great to profile Greener Henley here, who are doing inspiring things, and you'll hear all about them from their inspiring main driver, 𝗬𝗿𝗿𝗁.
So I'm 𝗬𝗿𝗁, I'm Executive Director of Greener Henley, which is a climate and nature action charity based in Henley-on-Thames. Just by way of quick introduction, I'm a qualified lawyer. I have been doing volunteer environmental campaigning work for the last 7 years. And what really drives me to do this work is my children. So I have 2 teenage boys and 2 stepchildren, a boy and a girl. And I really want to be able to look them in the eye and say that I did everything I can or that I could, in relation to what Caroline described as the great crisis of our time. So that's what really motivates me to do it. We have a goal, an ambitious goal in Henley, of actively engaging 5,000 people across our local community in the next 3 years. That represents about 25% of our local population. And we recently published a new strategy which focuses on 3 key pillars. So the first thing, so it's very much focused on place, the place of Henley. And the first thing is we're talking about making Henley safer by building resilience in the face of climate impacts. Making Henley cleaner by cutting pollution, and making Henley greener by protecting and restoring nature. So why does adaptation matter in Henley? We're a river town. We have had flooding over the years. Flooding is becoming more frequent and intense. We're also vulnerable, as many areas are, to flash flooding, more intense heat waves, as we're experiencing now, and of course wildfires, which people really aren't thinking about at all. And the reason that it's so important is, of course, to protect lives, homes, our health and well-being, our way of life and our economy. I should say here that we've just had the Henley Regatta, which brings some 300,000 people into the town of Henley. So we're a small town, 12,000 people. So it's a huge thing for our town. And the sport of rowing is becoming increasingly affected by this crisis, because we're getting higher river flows, which means more redboard days, which are days where they put redboards on the locks and people are not supposed to be using the river because it's too dangerous. And rowers are getting affected by this, so they're not able to train all year round now, and it's affecting their sport. Now I can hear you thinking, that's not really too much of a problem in the face of all of the other things that are happening around the world. But of course, this is the way that we can open the conversation with them, and this is already happening. The picture there actually is of a restaurant which has been flooded so many times over the last few years that they now can't get business continuity insurance. So terrible for their business. And that's obviously increasingly happening. So our objective here is to drive mass community engagement. And how do we do that? Well, we know, as Caroline was saying, 89% of people, want climate action. We need to reach more people. We need to really expand our networks and speak outside of our echo chamber. And that's really what our objective is. And we do that by building up our local networks. So working with schools, we have a very established schools network I'll mention in a minute, businesses, sports clubs, community groups, and we're using high-profile people, high-profile sports stars, particularly rowing stars, to help us to convey this message to their audiences. The picture here is of Professor 𝗵𝗵𝗺 from the University of Reading, who gave an excellent talk a couple of weeks ago at one of the iconic rowing clubs in Henley, and it was hosted by an Olympic rowing champion, so that brought in a whole new audience, and this is really, really effective for us. We have very defined rules of engagement around emotionally engaging with people, so using messaging like protecting what we love, especially conveying that message to parents and talking about children. And we do a lot of work with schools, as I said. We talk a lot about the personal connection to Henley, so people really feel connected to the place of Henley. And we're apolitical, so we need to be inclusive and attract people across the board. We're starting off on this journey, but we have made progress in relation to sort of laying the foundations, I suppose, of this work. But specifically in relation to making Henley safer, so we're starting to work with local councils. We're collaborating closely with Henley Town Council now on their emergency plan, working on enabling them to identify climate-related risks. And we will be doing that with the satellite villages around Henley as well. But a plan can just be a document on somebody's desk, and we need to bring it to life. So we're going to be working to organise public consultations and public meetings to really engage across the community to bring these emergency plans to life. We run a number of awareness-raising events. This picture here is a picture at our local theatre. 160 people who came to hear a panel discussion about river pollution. It was really popular, and we're running a similar event in November on flooding. So we really are trying to get that message out about adaptation. We have an objective to engage with 50 businesses in the next 3 years in various different ways, and one of those ways is to encourage businesses to develop business continuity plans. We know that 80% of businesses that have a business disruption of 5 days or more go out of business within 18 months. So that was a really compelling hook for businesses to get our foot in the door and start having the conversation. We have a very established schools network of nearly 20 schools. The last event we did with schools, we had 120 school children from 17 different schools. on the subject of pollution. And we're now working increasingly with schools. One of the things that we're going to be doing is working with schools to expand their risk registers to include heat waves, wildfires, other climate-related risks. And as soon as, of course, it's on the risk register, they take it seriously, the senior leadership take it seriously. Quick reference to climate cafes. We ran our first one during Great Big Green Week. These are happening a lot around Oxford at the moment, and they are very important in terms of building in resilience. We'd like to do more of those. But what do we need to make this real? We've got to have more support from our MP, who we met this morning, from local authorities, from media. We need them to use their influence, to use their voice, to support the work that we're doing, and to help us along the way. And we have an urgent need, despite the fact that it's Henley, of course it's a wealthy town, but we urgently need more human and financial resources in order to be able to do this work, and we know we can do it well. And that's the end of my presentation. If you've got any questions for me, you can contact us there. Thanks very much.
Really inspiring, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. But before we get to that, I just want to introduce the next thing that's going to happen, which is that Rupert and his co-director 𝗬𝗂𝗏, who you will meet in just a moment, are going to present this wonderful report to you. It's available online, and if you're very quick at the end, there are a few copies on the desk as well. So, Rupert.
Thank you. So, I'm sure that many of you here today will recognise the arguments that are laid out in this report that we're about to offer you a précis of. Our collective challenge is to land these in a way that resonates with a range of different readers to reach the mainstream at large. The SAFER campaign is trying to do some of that by joining up grassroots examples, such as the splendid ones you've just heard, with top-level strategy and policy direction, and bringing forth calls to action, which we will offer you in a little while. So the report, the SAFER report, sets out a framing that the SAFER campaign sits within. And to tell you about the guts of that report, I'm going to hand over now to my co-director and co-author on the report, Liam. Here you go, Liam.
Thank you, Rupert. Sorry, we can move a slide. The climate movement until now has been, as I think the people in this room know, a noble failure. We've recently reached levels of warming 1.5 degrees C, which science warned us not to. And that statistic isn't going to launch the public into action. Statistics never do, but what it means will. What it means is that more denial of insurance coverage and more worse disasters on its way. And that means that we're in the adaptation era, because of failure. And success will come when we get the climate-concerned majority involved. Luckily, adaptation is precisely the thing that we need to have, the kind of action, the thing that we need to actually achieve that. The adaptation action era. So next slide, please. Okay. Adaptation can broaden engagement by making the climate threat real, concrete, and actionable, right? So it can make it real by things like food shortages, overheating, floods, fires, and community strain are real. And adaptation allows us to accept those realities because it allows us to do something about them, right? Unlike mitigation or the global carbon commons, we can actually act to face the threat that we're under, right? So we can address food shortages, we can increase community cohesion, we can change housing stocks, we can prepare for floods and fires. So although nobody can drop their emissions enough to change the future, everybody can adapt in a way that changes their future. And that is absolutely huge when you think about it. It changes climate action completely. It allows us to disrupt the basic dynamic of climate inaction. We've been hiding from the truth, pretending there's still time, because we don't think we can face reality, and we don't think we can face reality because we don't think there's anything we can really do about it. But we can do things about it. We can adapt. We can become safer, if not safe, completely, right? So now that we've failed to avoid climate chaos, almost everybody can do something with their friends and family that meaningfully changes their community's future. So Rupert's going to explore that point in a minute, but first let's talk briefly about how that widens the climate movement. The image of climate action has been, until very recently, dominated by 15% of the population, which sociologists call progressive activists, to whom the traditional abstract framing of climate action appeals. Okay, it has been framed in terms of CO2 levels and global moral responsibilities climate change. In contrast, by making climate action personal, concrete, and local, able to be acted upon, we appeal to that silent majority, the 2/3 of the public, that is concerned about climate change but doesn't fit the image of activists or take part in vocal lobbying, who think about their communities first, without apology, and don't feel their voice matters on global issues. When they accept and act on the climate reality, then we're going to start seeing success. Okay, so I'd just like to say briefly here that I speak from a bit of experience because I'm exactly one of those types of people who said, well, yeah, I'm really concerned about this, but I don't see anything happening till the problem is so bad that it can't be denied by most of the population. And then suddenly we'll see something. And I promised myself, well, I'll be involved when we're in that era. And I'm pleased to be at this launch because it's exactly announcing that era. So over to Rupert to talk about more on this this topic. Thanks.
Why did it get so bad? Why is it so late in the day? Why is it so hot in this room? Well, this is the biggest single reason why. There is a massive coordination problem involved in trying to tackle the climate crisis at source. If you're going to decarbonize the world, everyone has to be involved. But everyone has an incentive to free ride on everybody else's actions. Say, I'm not going to do very much myself. Other people can do it. The Chinese can do it, whatever. Yeah? The great thing about strategic adaptation is that it offers a way around that terrible coordination problem of how do we coordinate our actions with so many people all over the world who are not incentivized selfishly to decarbonize, but are incentivized selfishly to adapt. And we need to do that in a way that is strategic. So that's the beauty of this approach. Next slide, please. And here's another beauty of it, or if not exactly beauty, another great relevancy of it to our moment. Strategic adaptation is now an absolute must if you care about the poor, if you care about the underprivileged at home or abroad, right? So it ticks all those activist boxes as well. If you're interested in taking care of people or helping people who need that help the most, then this is a must. Because the most vulnerable, as we know, usually are on the front line, are going to suffer the most and the first. Strategic adaptation is the way in which we can help them. If you go to a person who's got a low carbon footprint and say, well, this is about decarbonisation, so you need to reduce your footprint, they'll just think, well, that's irrelevant to me. How is that going to help me in any way? I'm nothing compared to people taking private jets, etc. But if you go to those people and say, actually, we're going to help you to not be in such a vulnerable position the next time there is a mega flood or a mega wildfire or massive food shortage or food price increase, then you're being relevant to those working class people or those people in the global south. Next slide, please. And moreover, it's a win-win-win if we do it properly. You heard the essence of this from what John said earlier in his Retrofit Balsall Heath presentation. We can build community, we can move towards the life we want. We can work with nature, not against it, as for example, by restoring wetlands, restoring peatlands, looking upstream if we're thinking about the flooding issues that we're facing increasingly now, rather than just building more hard, high-carbon flood defences which are going to get overtopped anyway, and when they do, they'll cause an even worse disaster than if they weren't there in the first place. Strategic adaptation is about doing it in a way that actually pushes us in the right direction, in the direction of decarbonisation as well, synergising directly with those efforts. This is what I call the beautiful coincidence. By and large, the very things we need to do to stop causing climate chaos are the very things we need to do to protect ourselves and to give ourselves better lives. Next slide, please. And moreover, we've got to do this. We've got to take this seriously. We've got to make sure that people understand that adaptation needs to be and can be strategic. Because if we don't, other people will do it. Populist climate deniers are already seeking to define adaptation their stupid, ineffective, dangerous way, as in this quote from our friend, not so friendly, Mr. Theis there. And when I say we here, again, I want to advert to this wide coalition. This coalition needs to be understood as including many people who vote Conservative, indeed many people who vote Reform. We know, and this is a potential Achilles heel of Reform, we know that most of their voters do not agree with their policies on the climate and ecological emergency. And this is one reason why in the Climate Majority Project we've been working very hard to work directly with Conservatives who get this. People like Rory Stewart and Amber Rudd and the Goldsmith brothers, etc. We need to enable it to be understood that this is a mainstream, sensible concern. And if we do that, and if we get busy with the argument and get into it and don't shy away from it any longer, and explain clearly to people how this beautiful coincidence can be enacted, then we can actually get somewhere. Over to Liam to make a final point about the relevance of adaptation to where we are now. After one more slide. Yeah, because I wanted to finish off my bit, I forgot, by saying this. The prize, if we successfully steer the narrative, if we manage to define adaptation strategically, is huge. It's absolutely huge. What is it? It is that people will get it. They will understand how critical the climate emergency is. Once they are doing this adaptation, once it's not an abstract thing off in the future, but something that we're doing, and then once they're feeling their agency around it, right? When you're doing it, you're no longer in the business of denying it or questioning it or even asserting it and thinking, yeah, but what can I do about it? Because you're busy engaged with it. So that's how the door gets opened. We think that strategic adaptation is the critical, up to this point, neglected tool which can open the whole Pandora's box of what becomes possible in terms of what we're going into. If we go down this route, if we actually take adaptation seriously, if we start to adapt strategically, then we potentially get to a place where we can actually put decarbonisation back on the map again. And otherwise we won't. And so the stakes are really that high in our belief. A final point on this from Liam. Thank you. Thanks for waiting.
Right, so some people might not immediately feel like, oh, we're definitely going to win that argument to define adaptation, but let's go into it a little bit. Why will we win that argument? It's for the reasons Rupert just spoke about, right? As people engage with adaptation, they will understand its limits. And there's a one-word argument or proof for that, which is called AMOC. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Current keeps Britain warm despite our northern location. It's right now destabilizing a bit. There's a very good chance it starts to break down. There's no way that a shallow reactive approach to adaptation can just offset that. As soon as you engage with climate reality and realize, well, that's what may be coming down the pipe, you realize, well, there's actually no way but a strategic approach that includes decarbonization that is actually a response to our reality. And when people start engaging with reality because they're doing adaptation, finding out what they need to do locally to protect themselves, they're going to realize that's the situation they're in. And once they realize all that, I don't think you really can lose the argument about defining adaptation. It has to be strategic. That's it.
Thanks so much, Liam and Rupert. And now we've got a bit of a call to action, as you might expect. And so I want to introduce you to Jarvis and Nick, I think is going to be your sidekick in a moment. Two are wonderful co-managers of the SAFER campaign, and they've got some things to ask you.
Thank you so much. Definitely my equal. Yeah. So thank you so much. Lovely to see so many people in the room here. So just to explain, so I'm here, I've got 2 young children, and I'm looking at their future, and I'm not feeling tremendously positive about it. So that's what's brought me here. So I'm all about doing things. So that's why I've got this slide. So my name is Ed Jarvis. I'm the campaign development lead here, and I've got some suggested things that we can all do, and a request for you to consider doing them today. So let's get into that. So what can I do? What can we do to build this adaptation movement to get to that climate majority as quickly as we can? So the first thing is go back after this into your communities, into where you work, talk to your neighbours, talk to your family, advocate for adaptation. Talk to them, explain what it is, get some feedback, have some engagement. Let's have a national conversation about this. And whilst you're doing that, figure out what's actually already happening in your community and think, can I support that? What can I offer and gift into that to make that stronger and bigger and better? And if there's not much happening, have a think about what should be happening. And if you're not sure, come and talk to us. We can help you. We can connect you to organisations that are doing this, like Henley, Retrofit, Balsall, Heath. Okay, so there's no, it's all right, I've got it. So get involved and advocate, basically. So that's probably the most important thing. This is a bottom-up thing. Let's not wait for government, right? It's not going to happen. We've got to get on and do this and demonstrate it. Wrong way. There we go. So today there's some things you can do. So we've got a petition, that Caroline Rupert are sponsoring. It's all about demanding of government a funded strategic national resilience plan. Okay, so we need the government to take this seriously. So there's been a report this week, the Resilience Action Plan published by the government, and it may be there's a couple of things in there to feel positive about, but broadly speaking, this is a completely underfunded space. They're not, the government is not taking this seriously enough. It's not strategic, and that needs to change. So sign the petition on your way home, when you're on your train. Sign it, share it. We've got loads of social media on our socials. Get it out there. Get your friends to sign it. We need to get to 100,000 in 6 months' time. So let's really go for it. And when we do, we have a debate in Parliament on this subject. So talk to us. So we've got some little mini interviews we'd love to do with you. Just little shorts using a phone. So Bridie over here and Linda. Where's Linda gone? Linda. Here we are, you're right in front of me. We'd love to just have a chat with you, capture it on film, why you're here, what you've thought of this, what you're going to take home. Literally, it'll take a minute or two. That would be amazing, so that we can use that. The personal stories are so important, right? Talk to each other. So this is a fabulous opportunity. Look at you all. We've got a full room here of people that are wanting to or are engaged in adaptation. So don't rush off at the end. Talk to some people that you've not met before. I'm going to, at least 3 people I'd recommend. Swap details, find out what they're doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it. Let's convene, let's connect, and that's how movements are built, right? And then donate. Okay, so there's time, yeah? So there's a lot of volunteering going in. So if you've got time, that's fabulous. Put it into your local community. Figure out what needs to happen. Build on the existing stuff, maybe create some new stuff. If you want to, donate time and get involved with the Climate Majority Project, wonderful. We've got some incredible volunteer community going on that's made today happen. Hugely grateful for that. There's an email I'll put up in a moment. But of course, we do live in a very financial world as well. So we're a very small team with a very small budget, trying to have the biggest bang for the buck that we can. We'd love to have some more money to, have a bigger impact. So if you are a funder, or funders that would be interested in this, we'd love to hear from you. And then there's some things you can do in the next week or two. So if you've got stories of where you've been impacted, or people, your communities have been impacted by climate change, we'd love to hear those stories. I think, again, coming back to that, so send us an email. There's the email, connect@climatemajorityproject.com. And also, if you've got plans to do things locally, or you've done things locally, we'd love to hear about that as well. So don't hold back on popping us an email. So that's me. I'm going to hand over to Nick now, who's the campaign manager, to talk about what's coming in the campaign. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see you all here today. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign itself and why I feel the campaign is just so really important. I've been working in this climate space for probably 10 years or so, and I think it was around 2018 that I really got the urgency and the need for us to really start to take adaptation seriously. And I've found in that time, I've done work with Transition Towns and other organisations, and I've found that there just hasn't been that sense of a really strong call to action from people, even when people in the Environment Agency and elsewhere are sort of telling us, we've got to do this now, we've got to start adapting. And so for me, this is really starting to give us a plank that we can sort of build upon. It's laying out a case, but that's just the start point for the actual campaign itself. So what is the campaign doing? Well, the first thing is it's just getting started. Okay, so that report starts as the foundation for what the campaign will become. But we're in early days, and what we recognise is that so much work is already going on, has been going on for years. All the stuff that Kate and John talked about, there are countless examples. There's the whole adaptation network from Exeter. There's all sorts of examples, probably so many rich examples in this room of things that are going on that just aren't truly visible and shared, and that people sort of have that real sense of this is already happening. We just need to shout about it more. So what we need to do is to start to shout about it, to start to connect ourselves up more, to be able to say, what is actually going on out there? We don't have all the answers in the Climate Majority Project. We're trying to help convene, we're trying to help move this conversation forward nationally, to give it more airspace, to give it more prominence. But actually, the expertise doesn't necessarily lie with me and Ed and Rupert and others. It's with you guys, it's with the people in this room, and the people that are also not just in community space, but in business and insurance and in wider society, that understand what the challenges are, because adaptation is a very locally specific thing. So how does it work in your area? What are the barriers? What are the successes? So we need to get people together and start to share this and understand what's the particular offer that SAFER needs in order to help move this conversation forward. So that's the idea. Let's convene people. Let's understand what SAFER actually needs to achieve. But if we just talked amongst ourselves, then that wouldn't really move everything forward. So the other bit is actually about how do we reach out to people? How do we get people in communities, in their workplaces, wherever, to actually start to think about adaptation, what it really means? How do we take them on that emotional journey that I'm suspecting that most of you have been on about why this is so urgent, why you're here in this hot room today, yeah? So there's this thing of how do you get people to really engage with this? It's a deeply emotional subject. It needs space, it needs time, it needs to be carefully curated so that people actually really get what we're talking about here and how impactful this is on their lives, their children's lives, and everything that's going on. So we really need to create those spaces for people, and that's what the SAFER experience is hopefully going to do. And there's also some more research coming out soon, which is going to talk about, well, where is adaptation currently being presented in the media? What are the narratives around this so that we can understand what's working and what's not? So that's another report that's due out in the autumn. But that's really the sort of the start point for the campaign. There's a lot more in the pipeline, but those are the sort of the initial starting points. And we really don't want to do this and just assume that we've got all the answers. It's actually, it's you that've got the answers. We need to just work together on this.
Ed, and thank you, Nick. And if I can just absolutely underline the importance of that petition. We need to get 100,000 signatures. It's one of those number 10 websites. You've got QR codes around the walls. If you could do it yourself and then get 10 other people at least, that would be a wonderful start. So please can you try and do that, because it would be wonderful to be able to really get the kind of profile that petition would give us. So these lovely people are very happy to answer any questions that you might have. And there's a few ones just there, right in the door.
Hi, yes, thanks very much. This is very inspiring examples, Balsall, Heath and Henley. So I have two questions. The first, the way I understand this is there's too little action by the public. We failed, we didn't mobilize even though we were valiant. So now what we're going to do is try and get the wider public engaged with SAFER, right? With focusing on local community adaptation, just as you're doing, very good. But then there's this assumption now that when people get involved in local adaptation, then they've got to realize it's not enough. Climate crisis is bearing down, they need to do more. Okay? So my first question is, why on earth do we think they would be ready to do more? I'm speaking from the United States perspective. Do we see people in local unions joining wider struggles? Do we see people in the environmental justice struggle who won against air pollution at the port joining wider struggles? I think that's a big assumption that because people are involved in local community adaptation, now we have a weaker consciousness to do something else. And my second question is, what about that something else? What is that? If we're serious about stopping heating, you've got to go up against fossil capital and fossil finance. In fact, you've got to go up against modernity. And that's not apolitical. That is the biggest freaking struggle that is highly political. People are going to be radicalized and we need a rebellion. So my first question is, why would you think local adaptation would lead to a wider consciousness to do something else? And second, what form is that something else going to take? Thank you.
Very super.
Yeah, I'll have a go at that super big question. So look, we don't know if this is going to work. What we know is that what's been done so far is essentially not working. And what we think is that there is a chance this may work in the big scale. Of course, if it doesn't, it'll still be worth doing, right? Even if all that happens is that we soften the blows of impacts from the coming storms, etc. Even if that's all we manage to do, that's still incredibly worth doing. The punt is that we may be able to unleash something else beyond that, in ways that Liam and I started to sketch and that are detailed in the report. The punt is that what people will do probably when they step in larger numbers into the adaptation space is at first probably quite a lot of what will be tried, frankly, will be shallow reactive defensive adaptation. People will for a while just agitate for higher walls on their rivers, etc. And then they'll realize that that doesn't work and is dangerous, etc. And then over time, we can try to accelerate this process. Adaptation may then be able to get more strategic. And then, when we get to the end of what that process can deliver, then we reach the moment that Liam was describing, when people may finally start to realize, even if we're doing stuff that looks upstream and is synergistic with decarbonisation, unless we actually deliberately try to tackle the problem at source, then it's still going to go on getting worse forever. So we don't know whether that final part of the chain will be able to be realised. What we think is that this way of actively, agentially consciousness raising, and if you will, changing the political culture at large, by getting so many people into this space that politicians start to be unable to ignore it. What we believe is that that is our best shot at getting where we need to get. Liam, finish that off.
Yeah. So I think, because I know you're a scientist, you'll probably appreciate a bit complicated answer or a little bit of intricacy there, right? Basically, we know that climate action is something like there's a coordination problem, as they say, right? If I don't do any climate, if my neighbors don't do climate action, or people across the globe don't do climate action, then my climate action in the mitigation era, the carbon reduction era, doesn't matter, right? That extends to knowledge, however, right? So me even knowing about what the threat is doesn't really matter for my outcome unless everybody else knows about it. So there's no incentive in actually investing in your own education. That's not true with adaptation. But the things that you have to know in order to adapt are exactly the same things you need to know in order to reduce your carbon emissions, right? So if I'm going to prepare for what's coming down the pipe in my locality, I basically have to understand the climate action problem overall, which gives everybody an incentive they didn't have before to actually understand the problem, right? To read the books, to actually think about what is it going to look like, all of that. You know, I think the people in this room probably know that's quite an investment, right? It's an investment that oftentimes doesn't make sense to people who don't have agency, especially on a local level, or a global level rather. But when you have agency at the local level and you actually need to understand the global level to exercise it, people are going to learn more. So that's, you know, a way to be a little bit more optimistic there. The other thing I would say is just that at the beginning of the union movement, people did get involved with larger groups, right? You know, the union movement has not had galloping momentum for quite some time. So
until we can get some momentum behind this.
Lovely. Thank you. Can I see? Yeah, Emma. Sorry, it's coming along.
Thank you. 𝗪𝗿𝗺𝗀𝗧𝗧, former chair of the Environment Agency. I also was the UK's commissioner to the Global Commission on Adaptation. And I think this is the point where I would channel in some of the extraordinary people absolutely at the forefront of the climate emergency into this room, where with projects that I have worked on globally, I have seen them fighting in a very different way. We've only just begun that real fight. We see impacts. I've been here for a bit longer on flooding. They've arrived full speed now on heating and all the other associated and joined up impacts. But I have seen with individuals in India, in other parts of the world, where the solutions, the fighting that they're now doing, the way they are adapting their lifestyles is allowing them to fight this agenda in a very, very different way. So whilst I think it's a big experiment, I also think it is absolutely what we need to do to bring about that change right now. So I am very curious to see how successful you are. I'll be joining up some of the things that I'm doing with this initiative, because we really do need to make sure that people at every level are engaging on this subject, not just engaging, but acting, and making sure that all the examples that I hope will come to the fore are scaled up and talked about to our political leaders at every level. Thank you.
Reminding us as well about how much we can learn from the global south, because they've been doing this stuff for a hell of a long time. I'm going to try and go right over there. There's a, sorry, someone's going to have to run. There's a person at the very top.
Okay.
Sorry. We'll invest in more microphones next time.
Yeah, apologies, this was chat. Yeah, my name's Harry. I'm a community organiser with Flooded People UK. That's a project that started this year. We've been working with around 50 different flooded communities over the past few months to try and lobby to get proper adaptation plan in place for them. Going back home where I'm from in Yorkshire, that floods quite regularly. And this, it really is found on the point at the moment where we need to be at as an environmental movement. I hope SAFER and other things like this continue to develop, because if we're not there at the front lines in these moments of struggle, we're not going to really have the sort of strength to really get the change that we know we need. I've just been out in Lincolnshire the last couple of weeks, door knocking in the areas that are really going to reform, but that also flood quite regularly, and where they just abolished the Floods Committee. And I haven't talked to anyone about this work and about, you know, the experiences of that. The question I have, and I think it's one we're always going to struggle to answer, is how do we make sure this amazing local work, like I know there's 50, 60 flood groups across the country doing amazing work in their area, how that pressure is brought to bear on government, who have ultimately the fiscal and regulatory power to get the changes in. Because I think one of the big things that's happened over the past 15 years, particularly with, you know, big society, whether we talk in those terms or not, is government retreat in the face of climate and other ecological disasters has been covered up with a push towards greater community and voluntary initiatives. So how do we kind of bring an oppositional logic to this that allows it to flower in a way that we get the adaptation that we need, right? And I don't expect an answer because I know it's a horrible question.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just while you're not giving an answer to that not question, could you, is there someone else on this side of the room? We could take two together, preferably a woman, if there's, yes, there's someone in a green dress, I think. Can you wave still? You're looking, wait, was that you?
I had a question. Sorry. You had a question. I had a question.
Okay. We're good hijacking of a microphone.
Women should always ask questions. I feel like such a fraud because I'm not involved in these campaigns, although I've sat in rows and done my bit to try to move the great majority and see the cause for really worth investing in. I was just wondering, particularly for the Balsall, Heath and the Henley group, I'm just wondering, my local council, I think, would like to do more, but at the same time is also struggling under all kinds of problems caused by briefings against low traffic neighbourhoods, and whenever you try to do something positive, everything's seen as a failure of consultation. I'm just wondering, are people finding that if they try to work with their council, are they pushing on an open door? Because are these kind of groups the bridge between sceptical citizens and councils that don't really have the money necessarily to always go into the grassroots level? Or, you know, how can we encourage councils to trust us and maybe fund us to do some of this work, because it seems that they're key.
Lovely, thank you so much. Let's come to Kate and John first, and we'll come back to the Harry question afterwards.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're lucky to have Oxfordshire County Council, there's somebody sitting over there who's really led on this work. So they are really encouraging parishes around Oxfordshire to develop emergency plans. But of course they're a small team and they have funding issues themselves. But they're very, very supportive of us. So we are working with them as the sort of feet on the ground in Henley to work with our local satellite parish councils to help them to develop their emergency plans. And so far, I'm really pleased to say that we are pushing on an open door, because you know, there are people, we're lucky in our councils that there are people who know that this is a real issue. Of course, not the whole council knows that. But it's a very compelling argument to say, let's help you to develop your emergency plan, because all councils need an emergency plan anyway, not climate risks, just a general emergency plan. But as soon as we start alerting them to the fact that there are climate risks, flooding they know about, heat waves they don't know about, wildfires they certainly don't know about, and that's new to everybody. But as soon as we start saying that to them, they go, oh, okay, and then they really have to do something, because if they don't and we've told them, that becomes then a local press story. So I think that is absolutely the way, and I'd love to work with the Climate Majority Project on getting a template motion for parish councils to develop an emergency plan if that's what's needed. And we can push that out through the National Association of Local Councils, perhaps all around the country, in the same way that the climate and nature emergency motions were spread around the country in 2018-19. Yeah.
Can I just see if John, did you want to just add a word?
Look, none of us can do this on our own, can we? And Birmingham's bankrupt. The West Midlands Combined Authority, I'm pleased to say, has now got a deeper devolution fund from Westminster, like Manchester. And we're working hard to develop a framework with Birmingham. And there are people within Birmingham Council who've been really supportive. The Cabinet in Birmingham voted recently to look at giving more money to the areas like Balsall Heath where there's real community action happening. But I think the key thing to understand here is that money is going into Retrofit, the area I'm involved with a narrow target of decarbonising homes, which of course we need to do, and its mitigation and so forth. But the National Retrofit Hub, I think last week, published a report which mapped out 42 different co-benefits of retrofit. And I would say if you multiply that by community retrofit, that could be 84 or 96 or something. And so I think the key thing is that the money is there, but it's how do we spend it. So what I and Retrofit Balsall Heath are working very actively on is, I think in the last couple of years, people in the retrofit world have understood that community-led retrofit is a good thing, that they understand the why of how we should be doing it. And what we're working now on very hard is the how. How can that happen? How can the procurement procedures, the sort of communities co-client work and that sort of thing. So I hope, we're pioneering this, and I hope many others will be able to follow. But none of us can do it on our own. I think we're well beyond the age where councils could do something on their own, and community groups can get to a certain outcome with voluntary hours and philanthropic work. But I think if we bring the whole thing together, then we've got something really powerful, and all these other benefits can come too.
I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
Time and heat. So I'm hoping we can get to two more questions. Rupert is going to have a go at Harry's question, and while he just gets the microphone, I was just going to point out as well that, of course, there are other allies in this space, and it seems to me that if we've got MPs that are less interested in listening to their own constituents, heaven forbid, then maybe they would listen to the insurance companies. The insurance companies are absolutely our allies on this. The kinds of statements that have been coming out in the last few weeks are extraordinary, predicting the end of the economic system as we know it. as things become just totally uninsurable. So that's my tuppence worth.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'll say a little bit on that in a moment. But to try to answer Harry's splendid question, and with thanks to the work that you guys do in flooded people, I'm meeting with 𝗺𝗵𝗻𝗃, your coordinator, tomorrow for the first time in the flesh, which is going to be great. I think I do have a kind of answer to the question, which is basically that is what I think we're going to try to do in SAFER, right? We're going to try to do some of that coordinating, which has been kind of lacking today, and that's something which we're going to need a lot more resources to really do it, but it is part of our ambition. We want the adaptation space to start to become known, and we want the whole image of what climate is as a question to be changed so that adaptation and the right forms of adaptation are put front and centre in it. So we are going to seek to do some of that kind of coordinating and networking to enable groups such as yours to be part of a larger picture. Along with, there'll be groups in coming years, I'm sure, for example, that are engaged in citizen fire watching, for example, as that starts to become a greater threat in this country, unless we go headlong into amok, if it's not the swings, it's the roundabouts. So I think you get the idea. Let's talk more. Yeah.
it's not the swings, it's the roundabouts. Two more questions. Yeah, I'll take one here, and then one more. Can I have another woman? Yes, the blue woman.
Mark Cliff from University of Exeter. As a lapsed economist, I'm glad that you mentioned finance here, because the one concrete thing you've been asking for here is a funded national resilience plan. Now, the first question that Caroline will probably be asked on the radio when this is out in the open is, where's the money coming from? Do you have any suggestions on that, or are you just throwing this over the fence to the government to deal with?
We always have suggestions on where we're going to find money. Let me just take the other question, and then we'll. Person in blue.
Mine is slightly a two-part question from allowed.
Very short.
So today you mentioned that this is like the start, and we're putting building blocks in place. My first and predominant question is, what is the single most important resource that CMP needs to make this campaign a success? And then, if you want to answer, I appreciate it's a bit hard, a bit mean, not hard, is, I heard the word failed used earlier, and I find that quite hard to listen to, because I guess the question is, what makes you think that this will be a success where perhaps other climate movements have, for want of another word, failed?
Thank you. Ed, did you want to answer the first bit of that question? Come back
Yes, no, absolutely.
What does CMP need?
Honestly, we need funding. It's what I said. I already said it. Yeah, I mean, more than anything else, I think that's the reality of it. The more, as I said, we're working on a very small budget. We've got a very small team, and we've got a huge number of volunteers that do an amazing job. But this is, it would be amazing if we could have some more funding too. So coming back to that, if you know funders or are aware of them, or if you are a funder, we'd love to have a conversation with you. That's the honest answer.
And I think it was Liam who used the F word.
Sure, I'm happy to field that one. So I'll just go back to the CMP's central theory of change. Why have we not succeeded in the climate movement? We haven't, the first word that comes out of many people's mouths when you ask them why don't we have climate action is denial, right? Engaging with reality is hard. And so that's why so much of our presentation is about engaging with reality. It's part of adaptation. And because you're directly facing the threat, right? You can actually do something about it. By your personal action, it's much easier to engage with reality, right? So I've always thought, I personally have always had the deepest intuition, we will never go anywhere until we get a majority of population actually engaging with reality. And I think adaptation definitely allows that for the reasons we went into earlier. You can do something about it. You can do something with a community that provides emotional support. It is so easy to get overwhelmed when you're thinking about the crisis that we're facing, because you can't do anything about it, and for the whole time that it's been a threat, it's been far off, you've needed everybody, and it's sort of like, well, I can't do anything alone, and I feel like I'm just making everybody else around me depressed when I talk about it. But when what you're doing is getting people into action, right, and seeing other people like you. That's another part, answer the earlier question. What's different about adaptation? Well, seeing people like you doing stuff is the greatest way to get people into action, right? So getting people who have not, the types of people who have not been doing anything, doing things, creates a type of psychological momentum, which is very different than what we've had to date. And I think that's why, for me personally, adaptation is the future.
Lovely, thank you. And did you want to answer the
Yeah, I'll go with the first question. I think the first and simplest thing to say is, if this is made a priority, then the money will be found, right? The government is quite happy to find money for its priorities, its missions. And some of those missions, it seems to me, are really good things. All of the government's missions are vulnerable unless it backs something like this. So I'll give you a concrete example. The electrification and decarbonisation mission, which obviously many people in this room will be super sympathetic with, that depends upon that new infrastructure being able to survive the climate extremes that are coming.
Yep.
We've done a bit of research on this. The national grid is putting in good preparations for the coming heat waves. Is putting in zero preparations for the possibility of amok collapse. Right? That is profound unpreparedness. That is recklessness. That is the opposite of the spirit of strategic adaptation. A slightly more detailed answer, and then I think when people stop, would be to say there are some obvious sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of things the government is funding, which you could stop funding and put the money into this. One that I personally would back would be to say stop the insane amounts of money that are going into the old-fashioned nuclear energy and put that into this. And/or another one, which is perhaps an even easier target, is the enormous, exorbitant amounts of money they're putting into completely speculative carbon capture and storage schemes. Put it into this and actually
Lovely. Okay, I'm so sorry for people who weren't able to ask questions, but there will be some mingling afterwards. But before we get to the mingle, which is very close, I think that Rupert and Liam had just some very last words.
Yeah, so we are almost at the end. At the end, we will encourage you to stay and mingle a while. I'm just going to run through a couple of quick reminders, really. So firstly, a call to action reminder. Please do sign the petition. Please consider reading the report. You can read it online, or you can get one of the hard copies.
It's working now.
Over here. Hooray! It's working now. There it is. There's the petition thing. And please, and this is the more difficult ask, please consider getting seriously involved. Please consider getting stuck into adaptation where you live, or where you work, or where you pray. That might mean setting up a new group. It might mean joining an existing group. There are many things it could mean. But if you're not already well into that, don't feel bad about it. Get active and do it. A few quick shout-outs to people in the room. I want to mention our incubatees. One of the things we do in the Climate Majority Project is we incubate especially promising, badly needed initiatives. We give them an initial bit of support of money and/or consultancy, etc. So I want to mention Cadence, who have been leading the way for several years now on thinking about taking adaptation seriously. Where is Paul? Paul Boatman. There's Paul. If you want to talk to someone from Cadence, there he is. And I want to mention Postcode Revolution, who are engaging in several projects of local adaptation resilience building within postcodes, so just people with their neighbours. Where's Jack Cooper? There's Jack, if you want to talk to Jack about that. I want to mention the other main CMP campaigns. So we have our business campaign. That's relevant, for example, to the insurance thing. I was with Helena at Chatham House yesterday talking about this. Where's Helena? There's Helena, who runs our business campaign. Helena, an expert in business related inner work. And she and I were doing some of that yesterday at Chatham House, presenting to a bunch of people in and around the field of insurance about what needs to happen. That's the Future of Insurance Working Group that we in the CMP have co-created. Another example of how we bridge out of the norm of what people think the climate space is into places where it really needs to be. And then there's our crucial Climate Courage campaign, which seeks to resource people and enable them to face into the difficult struggle of inner adaptation which is to come. We've got Josephine, who is here, and Les, who is there, who run that campaign. Do talk to them if you're interested in that. And Liam, do you want to give us a very quick word about the relevance of inner adaptation to where we're at and where we need to be going?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Rupert, I'm pleased to also tell people that we recently got lottery funding for the Inner Climate Response Alliance. I think it's the first publicly funded effort of any kind, of at least of that size, on addressing the inner part of climate action. So the head of our partner organization and the lead organization, the Mindfulness Initiative, is here, Eileen. And then we have a couple of people from CPA, including Nick as well, and Siobhan is around here somewhere. Exactly, there we go. So part of adaptation is really facing the fear. And so that's another part of the CMP's work, is bringing that into the form. So while we're making all of the work visible that's been done for years on concrete adaptation, there's also a lot of work to be made more visible on the inner side. So up until now, that hasn't really gotten the visibility. That's another thing that just needs to be put on the pedestal where it belongs. So we're going to be working a lot on that. In the future, we can use all the help we can get. So, yeah.
Thank you. Finally, can I invite the other members of the SAFER campaign team to stand up? So, well, that's Jenny, who's already standing. Chantal, Karen, is Karen in the room? There's Karen. Anyone else? Do come and talk to any of those people or to any of us, obviously, afterwards. Thank you also to our funders who have obviously made this possible. That's various people with small donations, thanks to any of you who may be in the room. And then with larger funding, we've got the Marmot Trust and the Open Society Foundation, who've made SAFER possible so far. As you've heard, we need a lot more where that's come from. Okay, that's about it, folks. I want to say one final sentence. It is too late to become safe, but let's make ourselves safer together. Thank you.